How's it going, buddy?
I'm alive.
I'm glad to hear it. Some people were wondering.
I was starting to wonder myself, brother. I had a couple of spells where I thought I wasn't going to be for a while. I literally twice this summer thought I was a goner, but they did put a stent in and 99% plugged up on the LAD, and that's the one that comes down from your heart and feeds the heart itself, and then my aortic valve was calcified and had stopped working, so they replaced that. It wasn't quite stopped working, but it was working very poorly. And so they did all that. And it took probably 2.5 weeks after the valve replacement before I felt like I could still function, and they still had to give me extra water pill to get the water out of my lungs. And it wasn't until then that I was able to really start functioning.
I could hear it when I talked to you on the phone. The day we talked, you were in the car on your way back to the hospital, and he would say a couple words and then have to catch his breath.
Yeah.
And then say a few more words and have to catch his breath. It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're looking good, though.
Thank you. No,
I believe you look quite a bit younger than the last time you were on this camera.
That's because I've been recycled.
Well, we're glad you're back, man. A lot of people have been asking me about you. I've seen some comments on the videos wishing you wealth and health and happiness and all that good stuff.
And folks, for those who care, I do appreciate it very greatly, and I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the thoughts and prayers and concerns that have been out there. So, anyways, let's get started on this podcast here.
Welcome back.
And yeah, we are back, and we're back in force. We've been talking half an hour already before we got started on the podcast. We're talking about metaphysical stuff and the potential of mass hysteria and so forth. And Bill asked me again, ask that question again so the people know what we're talking about.
So there's this theory. And the word is Corman, I believe, Corman. And basically what it says is basically a manifestation theory. If you think about something, there's people that believe in the, what's it called? The secret, the manifestation thing. You think on it and you bring it to you. I can't remember there's like a brand that they use for that sort of thing. But that thought goes back a long way. Manifestation, it goes back as far as time. So if you have one person, let's use Bigfoot. You have one person thinking about Bigfoot. That person's more likely to see a Bigfoot than the person that's not thinking about Bigfoot. You see what you're looking for. You got 10 people looking for Bigfoot. The probability of at least one of those seeing a Bigfoot or thinking they see a Bigfoot increases. Now you've got 20 people thinking about Bigfoot, and you've got 3 or 4 of those that claim that they saw one, which is going to increase the likelihood that the other think they're going to see one. Right. The more that goes, the more people you have thinking about one incident, the more likely you're going to manifest in some way whatever it is you're thinking about. So in this case, we'll say Bigfoot. The more people thinking about it, the more people that say they see it, the more likely it is you're going to see one, whether it's physically there or not. And then Cecil brought up a good point. He said, well, there's videos, there's images that we see that could be fake, could not be fake. Some are definitely fake. And then there's some that are definitely real, like it's definitely a physical thing. And I agree to him. And my question is, to what extent do people manifest? How many people does it take before the thing is actually there physically?
And that's a curious thing, too, because now I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing, because quark science says that you change the existence of a thing simply by observing it. Mm-hmm. And that just sounds so bizarre to me, but according to the scientists, they have basically proven this, at least on the quantum scale anyways. Now, I don't know if that applies to the present-day full scale of us, et cetera, in our regular lives or not, but it does throw a monkey wrench in the whole thought pattern. If that's true, why couldn't it be true with us. So now, and then my first response to Bill was this. All right, yeah, I agree that that could very well run right over into mass hysteria from that concept, okay? And I have seen some of it, and I've seen bits and pieces of it here and there, and I see it on some of the videos and stuff because people get so excited, and and I see a fuzzy spot, and they're saying I see a Bigfoot, and all I see is
Lob squatch.
I see a leaf fluttering in the wind, and that's all I can see, and so forth. So, dadgum if I didn't forget where I was going with that. And of course, senility strikes every 10 seconds. One of these days, I'll get lucky and it'll miss. But the point is there that I have looked at the videos that I've looked at, which are a certain number. I mean, 10, 20, 100, whatever. Probably close to 100, I'd say. And I looked with a skeptical eye in the beginning because I thought, well, I'd kind of like to believe that that's real, but I really didn't think it was because of the potential.
Bigfoot's calling.
But anyways, I was talking about the potential of what I see and what I didn't see, and I've seen some in the beginning that, well, I thought, well, that makes me really curious. And kind of made me excited about the possibility and all that kind of stuff. But I was still looking at it with a skeptical eye, and but still wanting to believe. And then I saw some that, okay, look, this thing is so scrawny. If it was a Bigfoot, it's about starved to death, and so it doesn't match the build and the criteria that they put out for Bigfoot. Yet they touted it as Bigfoot. And so forth. So I started getting even a more skeptical view of it. And then different things, obvious, some of them are obvious, the costumes and so forth. And then there's some that, that are just flat out board carved footprints. And they're not natural footprints at all. They just barely go into the dirt. And instead of 4 inches like a Bigfoot print would, and so forth and so on, depending on the softness of the dirt. And if it's really soft, it can go in 4 or 5 inches. If it's hard, it can go in hard, a half an inch or so into hard dirt because of their weight. And we can walk across that same exact right beside it and not even leave a footprint because we're only a couple of 100 pounds or less, as a rule. And so all of that, to me, it boils down to that there's some that it's just questionable, and then there's some that are just absolutely flipping hoaxes, and then there's some that when I see them, I'm looking at them, I'm like, especially this one particular one that Les Stroud had on his show. And I'm looking at this thing, and I can see the hairs on its face. I can see the eyes looking around, and I can see it turn its head. It's clear. It's not a vague shot in any description. And if it's a fake, it's an excellent fake. It looked real to me. So then there's others that I see that like on this hill in a long shot from these people. And then the next day they decided to go up there to check that out because they couldn't make out what it really was from a distance, even with binoculars. So they go up there and they find 20-inch long footprints. Now,
wasn't the height turned out way taller than they thought it was?
Well, this one here, I'm not sure if it's the same one or not, but you can see the outline of the hill.
Oh, it's actually on top of the hill.
Fading to the left, and it's on top of the hill, and all you can see is a silhouette from the distance. And it stands very still like it's watching them.
It's interesting if you see that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
That video right before they recognize it, if you can find the extended version, they're chatting and it's like behind them for a minute before they like recognize what's going on and start looking. At it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's just
I did.
there.
Yeah. That was part of the video.
Yeah.
I did see. Yeah, they were chatting and they kept saying there's something weird, and so they turn around and they see this, and then they're looking at it with binoculars and can't tell what it is, but they say that it looks an awful lot like what a Bigfoot's described to be. And then the next day they left because they were kind of, the way they described it, a little bit fearful. And then the next day they decided to go back and go to the exact spot where they saw the thing, not where they were at, but where it was, and on top of the hill. And sure enough, there was these very, very large footprints, natural-looking footprints. And then Jeff Muldrum, of course, going another step on the footprint thing. When you get the epidermis ridges, that's like fingerprints. But when you're born, they take the ink prints of your feet as a baby, and that helps to identify and keeps anybody from stealing the baby and all that kind of stuff. And they're individual to each person. But the point is that they're humans and apes are the only two that have that. And these footprints, some show potential epidermis lines, and in some show
dermal ridges, they call them.
Yeah, dermal ridges. Some of them show clear dermal ridges in completion, and it's like, now if you've ever tried to copy a fingerprint, it's a pretty tricky little deal to see your fingerprint well enough to copy it. It's another thing to copy it in reality, to actually draw that, and then to actually sketch that into the mud.
Or to somehow sketch it into I don't think you could even sketch it into a mold where the mold would translate. Like if you're stamping the track, I don't think you could. And I don't think a double-stepping bear, they talk a lot about a double-stepping bear.
Oh, yeah.
Where the back foot steps into the front print. I don't think they would show that kind of dermal ridge either.
They do that, but
texture, but not like that.
They always forget to mention when they talk about these double-stepping bears that you can see the claws, the claw marks.
Good point.
Okay, and Bigfoots don't have claws. And so...
Really gnarly toenails, though.
I imagine they would be gnarly toenails. I'm not a Bigfoot, and I got some gnarly toenails. Too much information.
TMI, Cecil, TMI.
But no, so this whole thing is, for me, is just completely fascinating. That there is something out there, and there's purported evidence that people have found them, captured them, and or killed them, and the government has swooped in and taken these bodies and or live beings and all the evidence and told them to never speak of it again. And of course, we know the government would not do any such thing, because they never hid anything about the UFOs from us. They never said that UFOs are real. As a matter of fact, they never have yet today said that UFOs are real. So they changed the name and call them UAPs.
Oh yeah, we got those.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Right. Yeah, we've heard of those. We got videos of those even. Yeah.
Aerial phenomenon, flying object.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get my point there. No, the government wouldn't do that to us. No, yeah, they would. And well, probably something I shouldn't say on air, so I won't give the details. But there were things in Vietnam that we weren't supposed to do that we did, and
it's off the record.
It's just they hid the fact, and only in recent months, even very few years ago, they acknowledged that we actually did some of these things. And one of them, I'm just going to say it, we weren't supposed to write home and say that we were in Laos because it was illegal and we weren't supposed to be there. It was an infringement upon Laos government and their rights, but we were still there. and it's been publicly acknowledged since then, so I guess it's safe to say. But no, the government hid that for many years. So that's not the only thing they hid. I could tell you a few more things about Vietnam.
That'd be a different kind of podcast.
Yeah.
That'd be a later at night podcast. I'm going to pull
Yeah.
a couple of these things together, Cecil, because I've just been brainstorming over here and kind of working backwards. So, story of my life, working backwards. Why would the government hide anything about Bigfoot? Doesn't make sense. It's just a creature, like you would think they would want it protected. That's the reason.
Exactly.
If there's a Bigfoot, if there's one Bigfoot in Colorado,
Yep.
the state is going to be shut down pretty much, because if there's one, there's more, and they're obviously, just by nature, they're going to be protected, and protected species need to have a habitat. In that habitat, you can't drill for oil, you can't run electric, you can't tap for water, you can't harvest trees, you can't touch it because it has to be natural to grow for their ecosystem, especially a bipedal hominid that's almost human. And not only do you say, well, we have to give up that land because, European Americans are so quick to give up land.
Yeah.
There's plenty of reason there, just political and financial, aside from public hysteria. They think people would go crazy over possibility of UFOs up there. Well, what if there was a monkey man in your backyard, but you can't see him?
Yeah.
That would create some chaos. And they did it with, you remember the spotted owl thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was basically that same thing. The spotted owls were almost endangered. They increased the numbers so they didn't have to provide habitat. We all know how that ended up.
Yeah. All right. So I want to throw in, I want to intervene just a little bit, throw in some supportive evidence about what Bill's saying about the protection thing. I just watched today documentary about the American buffalo bison and about how things went crazy back in the 1800s, and they nearly annihilated all the bison. It was atrocious what they did. They killed the bison, left them laying there, and just skinned them and left the meat to rot and such, and then left the Native Americans without food.
Which I think
and
was
without,
part of the reason.
It might have been part of the reason, but the biggest reason was they could make like $200-300 off of the hide, and back then $200-300 that was a lot of cash, and so forth. So the point is that they went to near extinction, and then they went to being spot saved on private farms, ranches, and some zoos and some conservatories. And eventually, now there's something like 35,000 bison in the United States, or 350,000, bison in the United States. And the reason that it is that because when people finally got their heads straight and they decided that this was atrocious and not good to annihilate these things, they made laws, and federal and state and all this stuff, to protect them and to keep them from being slaughtered just wholesale and annihilated and made extinct. And that is where Bill's coming from on if Bigfoot was real and acknowledged by the government, they would have to protect it just like they have to protect the bison. And we all know what
would need
happened.
a lot of space.
Yeah, Bigfoot would definitely need a lot of space, kind of like the bison did.
You know what didn't get protection?
What?
Used to be jaguars in North America.
I didn't realize that. I know there's been puma here, but come to think of it, now that you mention it, and I thought about second thought, I do remember just a couple of weeks ago seeing a Nat Geo thing about jaguars, and it mentioned that they had some in the U.S. at one time.
There were actually, you can check out. I'm going to give you folks at home a couple of things to check out. One, I have a little more detail, but on this one, check out like during the westward expansion, the Jaguars. You'll see photos where these guys have just hides and hides and hides and hides. They were a nuisance to them.
Yeah.
A jaguar is going to eat your kids and your livestock and your food and your house, and it doesn't care if you are in the way.
Oh, yeah.
They were dangerous, and they had no protection. And when was the last time you saw a jaguar in the wild, Cecil?
I've never seen one.
They did go down towards Mexico, and they are working their way back up. Actually, they've spotted several breeding populations in Texas, as well as there's some down in Florida, too.
Yeah.
Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
You can get that from nowhere. So, that's kind of a cool thing to look into, to realize that there was an animal that most people don't even know was native to North America. And they were they were annihilated for the sake of, I don't even know if they were getting money for them, but they were stopping their problem. Their problem was, these cats are eating my family, so I'm going to kill them. And they did. And then I want to jump back just a little bit farther. You were talking about the image you saw on Les Stroud's show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that particular one is from Radium Springs in Alberta, Ontario, Canada. And I'm actually going to put a link on this video because Les Stroud has said you can do that.
Okay.
He does a lot of director's commentary, and he said share my stuff. He posted on YouTube for free. He does, there's no whatever, so he would be okay with that. But that picture was taken. That was a Todd Standing one, Sylvanic Sasquatch, I think is what that one's called, and you can see that video. Les Stroud does it on his Survivor Man Bigfoot, and he also has a director's commentary version where he talks about it a little bit. All of those are good. I'll link them. It's really interesting. It's one of those things where you look at it and you go, okay, there's no BS moment. It either is or it isn't. And if it isn't, it's a really expensive, really good fake.
Exactly.
If it is, it changes everything.
Exactly.
And this guy that we're talking about, Todd Standing, he gets a bad rap sometimes. And the thing is, his version, first of all, I don't see Les Stroud spending a week up there with the guy if he was a fake. I have a lot of respect for Les Stroud, and I don't think he would do that, and not promote it. If he went up there and he felt like the dude was full of it, he would say that, and he does give his thoughts on the commentary. He's very open and honest about it. But Todd, he claims that he knows where there's groups of them and they migrate, and he knows where they migrate. For the most part, he's taken some people out there, but his whole thing is wanting protection for them. Where they are up in Canada is pretty remote. And he says, I want protection, I'll tell you where they are. And the government says, well, you have to tell us where they are before we'll give you protection. We can't protect something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And he says, no, I need them protected before I tell you where they are. Here's the rub. They wouldn't do it. So Todd faked a video to get the protection so he could reveal where they are. And he has been labeled Fraud Standing ever since. Now, is that a really well thought out excuse for hoaxing a video? Maybe. Does it make sense? Yeah. Because the guy tried multiple times before he faked this video. And he didn't fake the video to put it online to get any kind of... He faked the video for the court to provide protection so he could release the location.
Right.
So that's kind of the backstory on that particular video, and it is worth looking at. It is really, really provocative. And he stops it. Like, there's stop frames, there's enlargements. You can really check it out.
Yeah, and while he's talking about that, the Les Stroud, the Survivor Man, goes out there in a week or so at a time, and I've seen a number of these shows, and probably 7 or 8 of the ones on Bigfoot that he's done, and it's and Todd's individual things. I've seen that a couple of times, and
I can't get used to him without the beard.
Well, I don't know if I've seen him without
He
the beard
doesn't look
yet.
right.
You know, I probably don't look right without it either. But of course, I don't look right anyway. But that's beside the point. But no, seriously speaking, what came to my mind are these trees. Now, I've done a lot of wood cutting in the years. I used to heat with wood. I used to go out into this one, about a 10 or 12 acre woods, maybe 18 acres is pretty good size. And the fellow told me, he says, don't cut down a live tree. If you do, you're in trouble. And says you cut down all the dead ones and cut up all the dead ones you want. And I said, okay, so that's what I did. And so I'm out there, I'm cutting trees and stuff like this. So I'm handling wood. I know what that feels like. I know what they feel like at a certain size and all this kind of stuff. And I can tell you, a 4-inch log, 20 some odd feet or 25 to 26 feet long, is a heavy chunk of wood. I can,
Dead
or
or
I
alive.
mean, I take that back. I cannot do it today, but there was a time that I could have, and I was a weightlifter, and I did all kinds of crazy stuff. So I could handle that as far as picking that up and carrying it, moving it, and even leaning it up part way.
Just throw it up in a tree.
But throwing it up in a tree upside down,
Upside down, right.
is
Where the
like-
heavy part's up in the air.
yeah, with the roots, not the root ball, but still the if you take the root ball and then shake the dirt out of it, you got the roots left. And if you got that part of it sticking up in the air, that's heavy. That is way more heavy and awkward than the average person might think it is. And it's extremely difficult to get upside down. But even if you could, why would you?
No,
Why would you make a TP shape out of 3 or 4 of these things? I don't get it. I don't understand why anybody would, especially if they're trying to fake evidence,
right.
because they're doing it out in the woods, on off trail, and out of sight, where nobody's going to go to accidentally see it.
Another factor in that structure was the age of the trees. You would
Yeah.
think if you used the excuse that it was snow load or a windstorm or whatever, blew them into that, then you would not have a dead tree with a live tree and another dead tree and then another live tree, and they wouldn't be woven together. They would just be in chunks.
Exactly.
And these are woven. And Les Stroud does break that down on that video, and then he breaks it down further in the commentary. I'm definitely going to link that below. I suggest watching both, because you watch the first one and you have these questions. I wonder what this, I wonder what that. And the commentaries are cool. He's like in a cabin somewhere out in the middle of nothing, and he's just like watching the video with you and talking about it. And you get some more insight into what he really thought while he was out there.
Yeah, and the other part of that too, the other part of those trees is the broken trees that are still standing. All right, and you walk along and you see a tree at about 7 or 8 feet in height that's 3 to 4 inches, even 2 inches, and broken in half. And still in place, but broken in half, and the top half leaning over towards the ground. All right. I know people, and my brother-in-law is one of them. I never could do it myself, but he could take a telephone book, a Dayton phone book, which is probably 2.5, 3 inches thick, and he could actually get a grip on that thing and actually rip it in two. Now, he couldn't just grab it and snatch it and rip it. He had to really work at it. And you've seen people on TV do that stuff back in the day when that was a little more popular. Power Team, yeah, was doing all this kind of stuff.
Those guys were my heroes.
So think about that. Now, it takes them major effort to get a hold of that thing, to tug and twist and get a little niche started. And once they get the niche started, then they can start ripping the book in two.
They
Now,
fan it. they fan the edge out so they have a thinner section to rip, and
Yeah.
then they can. Yeah, there's like a trick to it.
So and well, even at the trick to it, that's still
Oh,
a
it's
phenomenal,
absolutely
phenomenal thing to do.
Your average
right?
guy's not going to do that. I'm not
yeah.
going to do it.
I mean, at my strongest, I was never able to do that.
No, I don't
I
think
was
me
able to
either.
do a lot of other things, but not that. I mean, my wrists were strong enough. I could hold a 8-pound sledgehammer by the end of the handle and hold it extended out away from me and tip the head down and touch my nose with it without breaking my nose, by the way.
That's the important part.
And then turn it back, flip it back up, not flip it back up, but
Stand it back up.
stand it back up, and then set the hammer down. I could do that, and I worked construction, so I was all the time doing stuff. But I'm here to tell you that there's no way in the world I could take a 2-inch tree limb or trunk and break it in two. I don't know anybody on the planet that's strong enough to do that.
Or break a series of them along a trail line, all broken in the same direction,
That
as
too.
if to show you which way to go or which way to stay away from.
Exactly.
We're talking a dozen or more,
Yeah.
broken off at the same height, but not broken off, just broken.
Right.
Not broken off,
Right.
just
broken, and there they are. They're broken and just lean over.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, "Oh, well, that was a windstorm." Okay. Well, then you got smaller trees next to it that aren't harmed,
And some
aren't
of
bent.
they wouldn't all be broken, bent but not broken. The
Yeah.
majority would probably be, if they broke, they would have fallen off. But that many in a row that are, you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. for a
That doesn't
windstorm.
make sense for that to happen on a natural occurrence.
Right.
I believe something had to do it, and the only thing we know of on this continent is to be strong enough to do that would be a Bigfoot, skunk ape. A skunk ape is essentially the same thing as a Bigfoot, just not quite as big as the way they described it.
Southern version.
Yeah, it's a southern version, but that's not because it's smaller. It's because it's southern. It's because of the climate.
Yeah.
And it's
Everglades.
warmer, and things don't tend to get quite as large in those areas. But that defies logic too, because elephants are definitely in that kind of climate, and they're pretty good sized fellas, 12, 14 feet tall and stuff like that. But as far as one area or the other, animals in the northern part tend to grow larger than they do in the southern part for some reason, and they say it's the climate.
I was just talking to Donna about this at work, the famous Donna, about how the deer and cows up in New England are bigger than they are down south.
Yeah.
Just colder, bigger animals and cooler climate. The skunk ape makes a lot of sense to me, being in the Everglades. If you've ever spent time in the Everglades, there's plenty of room and food.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and if you don't have to compete with the snakes and you know not how to avoid the alligators, there's unlimited space and food and shelter for them.
Even if you go north of the Everglades and go up into the swamps of Louisiana. Okay?
True.
I lived in a house that was built on reclaimed swampland. And every time a truck drove by, the house would go wiggle wobble and shake up and down, because it was sitting on pedestals, not a regular foundation and footer. And the truth of the matter is, I had a 5-foot alligator in my front yard, and enough said about that. But anyways, the point is that I walked that woods, the swamp, in that just about a mile or so, and it was like some kind of seriously congested. There were critters everywhere. There were all kinds of different critters. There were snakes there 8-10 feet long. I have no idea what kind they were, but they were big snakes. And of course there were small snakes too, and all kinds of other critters. So, and that's just in the northern part of the swamps of Louisiana. Now, going into further in part, down by Thibodeau, I remember one day at the Buick store we was working at, or I was working at, we were having lunch, and one of the guys said, "Man, look, there's a 12-foot gator out there." And the river right behind the dealership, you could see roughly 10, 12-foot alligators swimming along, just kind of lollygagging along. And it was nothing unusual to see that. It was kind of unusual to see one that big in that river, but still not totally unheard of. And they were all over the place. There were people killing gators right and left, during hunting season and stuff, and illegally I'm talking about, and so forth. So why, with all of the food that's available in a swamp, animal-wise, why couldn't a skunk ape or something like that survive? I'm convinced completely that there's absolutely enough food there for multiples of them to make it just fine.
One argument that I've heard for that is, well, when the hurricanes come through, you'd think you'd blow them out. The only thing hurricanes blow out is people.
Yeah.
A skunk ape from Louisiana down, first of all, it's very dense in those woods down there. Those woods and forests are dense, not like we have, up north. We have dense forests, but down there is dense. And a lot of times the ground will go all the way up past your ankles. You'll stick real quick. You got snakes, you got alligators, you got wild pigs, you've got deer, you got bear. None of them blow away when the hurricane happens.
Yeah.
The hurricanes actually feed the Everglades because most of the snakes that are there, people say they came from people releasing their pets. That may be some, but think of a PetSmart. It's got pythons in it to buy for pets, and then the glass blows out during a hurricane, and all those pets are wild.
Yeah.
And they breed like rabbits.
Oh yeah, it's a huge problem down there. The pythons are. Mm-hmm. The constrictors are going crazy,
and they have no competition. There's
right.
nothing like that there, and I think Bigfoot would have a better chance of dealing with the python than you or I would.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So, what do you think about maybe next week? What if we did an episode on skunk apes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to do that?
Sure.
I was thinking we need to, kind of spread things out a little bit, talk about some other stuff, and skunk ape's kind of still in the category, a little different.
Yeah.
And I got a few other items that I'd like to touch on, and I'll send you some links to that.
Okay.
It just feels good to be back in the saddle.
Amen to that.
You ready to call her a day?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, folks.
I'm ready to go.
He needs a nap. Y'all have a good night. It's good talking to you. We'll see you next week.
All right, bye.